Okay, I think we'll get started. So, hi everyone, welcome back. Today's topic is just going to be HTML specifically, and we'll delve into a little bit of CSS, a little bit of JS as they relate to the HTML document and how those two are embedded in HTML. But broadly speaking, it's just going to be HTML. So we're gonna start with a lecture. I have a PowerPoint here, and then we'll move into some practice, either in Replit or on your own environment, whatever you want. Maybe some demos, and then we'll end with a Kahoot. Okay. And if you guys have questions at any point, just raise your hand, type in the chat. Yeah, Joseph and I are both available for questions. So without further ado, let's start with the lecture. So first of all, disclaimer, this is actually a lecture from MIT's Intro to Web Design course. And we're able to use it because it's for educational purposes only. So just know that it's like a reputable source. But yeah. So starting with what HTML actually is, let me know, can you guys see the screen? Okay. Great. If you guys miss something on the slides or if it lags or anything, just speak up or message in the chat. We'll stop and go back. But first of all, let's talk about what HTML actually is. So HTML is basically, it stands for, oh, give me 1 second. Why can I not move this? Okay, apparently I can't be in slideshow mode in Zoom, but it's fine. We'll just deal with this. So first of all, what HTML is, it's hypertext markup language, and it's what every web page runs on. And essentially, it ties together, we talked about this a lot last week, but it ties together all of the elements of design, of functionality, of responsiveness. And so HTML, think of it like the noun, what the structure of a web page is and what the content is. And the way it's organized is a bit different from other languages, the backend languages. If you guys have experience with other languages like Java, Python, or things like that, HTML is more of it's meant to be read like a text. So they're indicated by these greater than, less than signs or little brackets, and they're called tags. The tags are usually paired. For example, when we say HTML to indicate that this document that I'm writing is HTML, we're going to have an opening one with the words HTML within the brackets, and then another closing one with a backslash and then HTML to indicate that it's the closing tag. And note that it says here the affected text is between the two tags. So anything within the two tags, be it another tag, plain text, an embedded image, as long as they are between the two tags, anything you do to do those two tags is going to apply to everything within it. Mainly that's going to come in the form of CSS. When you apply different designs to a certain tag, think of it like a certain section of the web page. It's just an identifier, and it applies to everything within the tags themselves. And more on this, like I said before, the opening and closing, you can tell them apart by the backslash. So for example, this B here, that would be, it follows the same format for whatever you put in here, HTML, head, body, div, span, any of that. And so this warning is between the two tags. And in this case, this tag functions a little bit like a CSS tag in that it changes the text. And so this one specifically makes everything within it bold. And the funny thing is, if I put another tag within this tag, we'll touch on this more later, but there are between certain tags, there are some tags that you can't put within other tags. But generally speaking, if you are able to put another tag within a tag, then the outermost tag will affect the inside as well. In other words, the content within these tags, even if it's within another division, is also going to be bold. And this is called nesting. But honestly, you can call it whatever you want. And so you have to close it within itself, which is to say that it's like parentheses. When you write a math equation, the parentheses have to be balanced. You can't have a closing parenthesis when there isn't an opening parenthesis, or you can't have more closing parentheses than opening parentheses, things like that. And so the same thing goes with HTML. One really helpful way is to actually think of these like parentheses. You have to have this specific closing tag between before the closing tag for the H1, because you can't have half a tag within another one. HTML simply won't understand that. So they always come in sets. Now, there are some exceptions where a tag only has an opening and not a closing. And those you can simply search up. Some common ones we can memorize. But as a general rule of thumb, always check to make sure that tags are closed. Otherwise, you'll get errors. And HTML is, in my opinion, quite hard to debug compared to a lot of the other languages because there isn't a control flow or a sequence. So this brings us to how the web page is actually organized. All of them will have some things. I touched on this a little bit last week, but for example, we're going to have an HTML tag always, to make the computer realize, first of all, this is an HTML document. It knows how to process it. We'll also have a head. Technically, you could have a document without a head, but it's recommended that you do. The head basically contains metadata, meaning that it contains things that readers at a glance should see to understand broadly what the web page is about. And in the head typically is where the title is. So that's an important piece of metadata. What this web page actually is, it's descriptive. But other things that are going to be put in here are things that perhaps aren't necessarily related to the user, but to other programmers or the interpreter, what interprets these languages in the computer, that applies to them as well. So for example, let me reshare my screen so that we can see my replit. Okay. This is the replit that I shared with you guys last week, and I'll resend the link later when we start practicing. But something to note here is that, for example, within this head section, in a typical HTML document, we're going to have these meta brackets. And the meta is something, it's like metadata. It tells you, for example, here, UTF-8 is the character set that is used behind the program. The viewport, the device width, and initial scale all tell the computer how to show this, what % of your computer screen to actually take up, what screen to display it on. And so all that is to say that whenever you have the head tag, don't try to put lots and lots of content in it. And on the flip side, this applies when you have an HTML document that you're trying to interpret. Go to the head first and make sure you understand the head before moving on to the other parts. And by other parts, that's body. Body is typically like another one of those all-encompassing tags. In general, as a general rule of thumb, anything that's not between the head tags is going to be between the body tags. And of course, head and body is all within HTML, as you can see on this right side. And so more specifically on the title tag, I didn't talk about this a lot, but this is also extremely important because it's what a lot of, for example, search engines will use for SEO or keyword optimization. And of course, there are ways to work around that. But again, this just highlights the importance of having clear and concise metadata so that people can interpret it, you can interpret it when you come back to your code a long time later, and so that web browsers can make your website the most optimized result when users try to find stuff like it. And just moving along on text formatting. This is something that I also mentioned a little bit last week. Don't try to format your body text by splitting lines, by putting spaces and paragraphs. Those are completely ignored in the HTML language. It's just pure content and structure, not at all design and visual. There are some exceptions to this, so underlining, italics, and bold facing. But in general, just know that it's not going to be whatever you expect. So two more here. A new paragraph. This is specifically going to create a new line automatically for you, as in creating a new paragraph. And that's simply a way that we organize things. But you can also manually add things like line break. And this is one of those tags that actually doesn't have a closing one. The reason being that you're not going to have content between a line break. That's simply not possible. And so it's just one command, and you wouldn't have the actual next line text afterwards. It would just be whatever is on the next line. And as I mentioned before, don't worry if you can't remember a lot of these tags. In fact, I forgot what you and I tags were before seeing this slide. A lot of this you'll pick up as you work, but really the most essential ones are just, for example, paragraphs, head, body, div, and span. A lot of the other ones you'll be able to search up quite easily. So this is another one of those things. I'll mention it quickly. You can change the font and things within HTML, but a lot of programmers will recommend that you do all of this sort of styling within CSS so that they're divided into the three languages, the three functionalities. Structure, design, and functionality can be divided into the three languages. And so this makes it much easier when you program and much more organized. So I'm just going to skip over some of this design. And the next thing more relevant to structure is headings. So headings is something quite interesting because there's a set number that HTML will actually accept. And they're pre-programmed so that you are organizing them by order of size or importance. So for example, if I had here heading 1, that would indicate the largest, the most important, and it goes all the way up to 7. And that's just another way that's pre-programmed. You can easily organize your HTML text. And this over here, this is my one issue with the HTML PowerPoint that MIT offered. There's a lot of styling things in here, so you can align it in there, but don't worry about that for now. That'll be CSS. And then, of course, with any other language, just like any other language, you're going to have comments. And it's just quick note, it's a bracket plus an exclamation mark, 2 dashes. And then the closing bracket here is 2 dashes and the smaller sign. So whatever you want between this is your comments. And something nice about this is that you can have an inline comment. So after you close the comment itself, you can keep writing more HTML code, which isn't something that you can typically do with other languages. And this is something that I want to mention. So when you see a lot of HTML documents, you'll see things like blink. Intuitively, we can probably understand that it has something to do with the appearance of the text. It's going to flash or something. When it comes to these things, I recommend just ignoring them because, again, this is more design, more formatting, as is, for example, color attributes, font size, all of those things. But of course, some programmers do prefer to do these basic things within HTML. And I encourage you guys to experiment on your own time which one you prefer. Especially when you don't have a lot of design that you need, I would recommend going with the things that HTML provides. And here's an example that includes that. If I were to, well, okay, let's get some practice interpreting this. So first of all, we're always going to start with the HTML tag. Everything is going to be within that. And head here, you can notice that they omitted the meta tag, the metadata about what character set we're using behind the computer, technical things that we don't need to understand. The only thing here is the title. And the other section, everything else, is within the body. And here is something I want to mention. You can see here, this BG color stands for background color, and text. This red stuff is actually within the body tag itself. So you can notice that they didn't close the body tag, the less than sign, the greater than sign, before they added all of these things. And this is because this is CSS, essentially. It's called inline CSS. And so in CSS, we would be able to say, for example, we would select, the term is a selector, we would select the body tag, then say, okay, the background color is black, we want the text to be white. But some people, for quick changes and quick experimentation when you're trying to visualize your web page, some people will use inline CSS to render it, to create it more quickly. And the next thing is images. So images are one of those things that don't have a closing tag because you can't have content between them. And that's a thing that you'll find throughout these tags. But what makes these kind of hard to interpret at first, especially, is this SRC attribute. So all of these things between the tags, we can call them attributes. This SRC stands for source. And this is almost like a JavaScript sort of attribute, but just know that within images, links, you'll see hrefs. A lot of these tags, if you see something that looks like a URL in general, they're going to either be an image or a link. And that's how you indicate where they are. And now something really powerful about this is that once you have the URL, because HTML is like is a web. Oh, sorry, Lori. What do you mean? An example of what?
How you put text in, like, for the image.
Sorry, you're kind of cutting out. Could you repeat that?
Oh, I said how. Like, can you show an example of how you put the tags for the image?
Oh yeah, sure. So I can actually copy this exactly, or let's go back here. So we would start with the image tag, the image indicator, and I would specify the attribute, the source, and between quotes would be the URL. And this is actually, thanks for asking the question. This is a good segue. So one thing I wanted to say is, for example, if I search up an image of an apple, or the company, I suppose, let's copy the image URL here. Because HTML is run in the web, let's copy link address. Okay. So because HTML is something run on the web and it's interpreted in a browser, we can actually input URLs just like this. It doesn't have to be something we've downloaded already on our computer. So if we run this, oh, okay. See this little image sign here? That's something that should be showing, which indicates that there is an error somewhere within the way that I formatted this. And oh, were you guys able to see the Replit environment? I just realized I might not have shared it.
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Let me share my entire screen instead. Sorry about that. Okay, now can you guys see the Replit environment?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let me just restart that process. We're going to start with the image tag. So the IMG, that's HTML specific. It will tell HTML this is an image. Afterwards, we're going to specify an attribute or like the description and adjective for this tag. And that in this case is SRC, which stands for source. we're gonna put the equal sign, and between quotation marks is gonna be where our URL is. Now, again, don't worry if you can't remember all of this. I don't know how many of you guys were here last week, but let me just re-show you guys. Tools like ChatGPT or even on the web, it's extremely easy for them to even debug your code after you've written it. But let's pretend, for example, I've forgotten the syntax of how to write an image tag. So let me just ask, how do I write a image tag in HTML? And it'll explain to you, it'll even give you an example, in fact. Yeah, there's a really long explanation, but just experiment with the code. I feel like it's a good learning tool just to get the syntax down. If you see it over and over again, you'll remember it sooner or later. And so this is quite interesting because this is something else I want to mention. If you look at my image tag compared to the one that ChatGPT gave me and is the correct one, the only difference is this alt attribute. The alt stands for alternative text, which in this case is in case the image has trouble loading, what we're going to show instead. And in this case, for example, if I search up, let me just search up like a different image. Let's take this one, right? So if I have the actual image, open image in new tab, once I have the image here, you typically want something like a JPEG or a PNG. But again, the powerful thing about HTML is that because it's rendered within the browser, it has access to the web technically. It doesn't have to be downloaded. You can simply Google an image and input the URL in here, and it works just as fine. Now, at this point, let's just delete this for now. At this point, if I run the code, it should technically show the image, which it does. And so we can resize the image later and things, but just so some of you might have noticed, the alt attribute here, in the syntax that ChatGPT gave me, we had alternate text in here. This is just in case the image doesn't load. And okay, this is going a bit deeper than I had expected. But for example, in Replit, the image simply won't load if I have an invalid URL. Let's just delete that for now. And if I run this again, the image just won't load. It'll indicate in here that there's supposed to be an image between these two other things that were already in the Replit, but it won't actually show. But it also won't throw an error. Within some other coding environments, you will be required to actually specify something to show just in case this is wrong. So here, for example, let's just say, uh-oh, the image is invalid. And because I have an invalid URL, now it's going to show, oh, the image is invalid. But just remember, this is something that was quite frustrating to me when I started HTML. If you ever run into something like this, it's typically because it requires that you have an alt attribute. Okay, now we have a pretty good understanding of images, I would assume. And see, yeah, so some browsers won't let you have images unless you have the alt attributes. And some just plain won't accept images at all. So having an alt there is a good plan B. Now, we'll go over this really quick. This is kind of like images as well. The links, you're just going to put in a URL. And the thing here is, as opposed to an image tag where you can't really have content within an image, you can change the words of the link. So have you guys ever seen, for example, when someone sends you a link, it's not www. something something. They've shortened it into some words that they've written. This is how we do it in HTML. The label here is what's actually going to appear, and this URL is what it actually will lead to. So really quickly for another example, okay, it's better if I don't copy. So let's just use the same URL as before. So we're going to have an href, which here is the URL. And again, all of this you can search up quite easily. So let's just input that there. And then we're going to close the tag. And because this is one that requires a closing tag, I typically like to close the tag just before. And you can see actually, I was started to type my own, but as soon as I hit the backslash here, the Replit environment and a lot of other ones as well, such as VS Code or IntelliJ, they'll fill it in for you. And between this, let's put what I actually want this link to show. So let's just say it's an unknown link. And if I run this now, it'll show, see, this is an unknown link. And you can see my mouse turns into the little hand. I can click on it and it'll take me to where it is. And this is, you'll notice that it actually doesn't tell you, okay, this link doesn't work. That'll only happen when you click onto this. See, the IP address cannot be found. It was invalid. So that's just another detail that you guys might notice. But another thing that while we're here, I want to point out is that if you look at these lines 15 to 19, I can enter however many lines I want. I can tab this, I can have the words really far apart. But when I run it, the link is still going to show like that. And this is what I mean when I say HTML is for the structure, it's for the content. It's not going to show you the tabs and the spaces. HTML is programmed to ignore it. So don't worry if it doesn't look like what you expected it to. If you wanted it to look like this, HTML isn't supposed to do that. And that's CSS's job. And we'll talk about that next week. So back to the lecture, this lecture is, the PowerPoint is longer than I'll go through. So we're going to skip the anatomy of the link. We talked about this. And then again, you'll see you can change the color of the links. You can add things like mail to someone. This can be an email address. You can have anchors. You can have the URL be a specific part of a web page rather than just the default. There's more on anchors. But all of that above is simply more details, more design related things that you guys can experiment on your own time. The last thing, or maybe second to last thing, I don't remember, thing that I want to talk about today is lists. So this is something that will come up when you have, for example, a Google form, any sort of form really. When you see like a menu on a restaurant's website, or bullet points on Amazon, on whatever website you see, these are all going to be lists. And so you can imagine out of all the things I just listed, they look super different. A menu, they might not have bullet points. On Amazon, it's just plain text. That is all a part of CSS. But what it boils down to is it's just a plain list. And that shows through the HTML. And this slide specifically is talking about ordered lists. When we want something to appear in a certain order, we're going to indicate it by the OL, ordered list. And LI is just a simple list element. And when you render it, you can see there's going to be a 1, 2, 3. That's how you know that this is an ordered list. This is more attributes, design type of things. But the other type is an unordered list. So for example, instead, we're going to have a UL tag. And the only difference other than that, when we actually show it, is going to be the bullet points rather than the ordered ones. And again, there's more ways to format this when you use CSS, but the general structure is going to be the same. So yeah, okay, let me see. Yeah, okay, this is the last thing that I'm going to talk about today. The rest of the PowerPoint, I've sent out an email to your parents and some of you. Let me know if you guys didn't get the email 3-4 days ago before our first class. And the PowerPoint is in the email as well. We don't have time to go over all of this. I wish we did. But up to forms, this is basically all you need to create any sort of simple web page. Forms are basically a version of a list, except there's different elements, and then you can enter information into fields where you specify the user should do. Okay, we'll have a demo later, but here, for example, the shell, these are just basic terminology that you might see around. The shell is the part that the user fills out. And then the HTML tags, Okay, the HTML tags, okay, don't worry about this part for now. That's just more organization and syntax and formatting. That doesn't really matter. But within a form itself is a lot of complex HTML elements. So you're going to have, for example, plain text over here. That might be a div or a span. You're going to have a text box repeated here. You can have drop-down menus. You can have selections, checkboxes, scrolling. But all of these things, essentially, you can see the specifics of how to create them here. But something important to note is that once you know the names of the tags, it's just like anything else in HTML. For example, the form is going to start with an HTML tag. Well, I guess I'll go here. The form will start with the form tag. And then within it, you're going to have text, you're going to have a paragraph tag, you're going to have the tag that indicates a checkbox. For example, I don't even know what that is, but quick Google search. This is how programmers generally work in the real world. You don't have to memorize a lot of these things, especially when it's HTML or CSS. So just know that the general structure, we've gone through so many examples, lists, links, images, comments, text, nested tags, all of these things are going to follow the general structure of the tags. And if you ever forget, just look at any HTML document you want and follow the structure here. Head tags, HTML tags, body tags, and they're all going to be the same. Okay. So at this point, we're done with the lecture. Let me close this. That took longer than I expected, actually, but it's fine. We have some time to actually experiment with this. Let me send a link to you guys. If you guys have a Replit account, please join this link. And if you guys don't, please make an account. It's really quick, just with an email. It's just a good way, I think, we can all practice within the same environment. So here, let me just delete a lot of things that I put in here. Okay, run that again. And oh, okay, one last thing I want to talk about. This wasn't mentioned in the PowerPoint for some reason. This tag right here on my screen, this line 16, this div, like a division, a section, this is just the most basic tag for like a section. It just means a section. And whatever is in here will be on its own line. And yeah, there's not much to say about it, but this is just a really common tag that you'll see all around. Okay, so once you guys are in here, why don't we all practice making a list of our names? So something really simple, I'll start. Or actually, yeah, okay, I'll start, I guess. So there's multiple ways to do this. Since we were talking about divs, let me just show you, for example, with a div, a division, a section, I'm just gonna put in here Dabao. And I run this, it'll show on the page, and okay, it's taking a while to load. But, oh, do you guys, okay, speak up if you want or type in the chat. Do you guys see an error that I made here? So in terms of syntax, I did nothing wrong. But in terms of formatting and what part of the HTML I'm writing in right now, do you guys see anything wrong? If not, don't worry. I barely caught this myself.
No.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, okay, Daniel got it, yeah. So I accidentally typed all of this in the head. I didn't even notice. But here you can see the head is all for the metadata. We have a title, we have a link to this is actually a link to the CSS that we're going to write later, but I should be putting all of this content within the body itself. And here you can see, this is the part of the beauty of HTML. We can put as many new lines between all of these things as we want. It's just visually extremely easy for us to organize it. And that's just the way that HTML was designed. You're supposed to look at it and with practice, be able to mentally see what the website is in general going to look like. So why don't you guys all practice? Just type div, copy what I've written here, and insert your names into the environment on the right as well. And you guys can maybe search up other tags as well, other tags that will allow you to do this. Google it, ChatGPT it, or just copy the div. For example, one clue I could say, for example, is the paragraph tag. The paragraph will generally do the same thing. And there are other tags as well. I'll stop talking just in case people want to go and explore for themselves. Get rid of this. And I see not all of us are inside or in the Replit right now. If you guys aren't there, don't worry. Just experiment on your own time. You can also create an account, open your own environment on Replit, completely free. Or if you have VS Code, IntelliJ, other coding environments, experiment in there. And feel free to practice with whatever tags we've done before. Insert an image into here. If you want, go back to the PowerPoint or Google ways that you can change the color of the text. So yeah, let's just take 2-3 minutes, 3-4 minutes to play around. And for those of you who aren't in, either use this time to register for an account, work in another environment, or just watch on my screen. Okay, since no one has done it yet, I'll tell you guys, for example, other than the div, the paragraph here, I can type, hi, this is a paragraph. And if we rerun this on my screen, you should see the paragraph should be its own paragraph, I suppose. And if it doesn't go over a line, if it doesn't go over the width of my page right now, it should be formatted just like a div. Like from this, you aren't able to tell what part I wrote this in. And okay, something is weird here. Okay. See, let me just get rid of this line for now. You might see it's formatted weirdly here. This is because of CSS. So let's rerun that. Yeah, see this paragraph is its own line. The only thing that denotes it as different from the div is that it has a little bit more white space. So any like margins in HTML, we call it white space. So any white space is going to be slightly larger, but otherwise it's all the same. And let's see, someone, I think maybe this was Joseph, maybe not. See, this is another list that we can put here. For example, if I change this, week 1 is HTML. Week 2, we're going to learn about CSS. Week 3, we're going to learn about JavaScript. Simple things like this. And the last thing really quickly that I want to mention, the last way that you can do this commonly is use a span. A span, the only difference between a span and a div is that spans can't have new lines between them. It's going to span the width of the page. It's going to span one line, and that's it. This will always be on one line. And you'll see if it exceeds the width of your page, the line will simply disappear off your screen. it won't move to a new line because it can't have a new line by definition. And the div span difference is typically what programmers and teachers will use to demonstrate the fact that you can't have certain tags within another one. So one last example on how to create nested tags. Let's just move all of this down a bit. And up here, let me show you guys. I can have a div here. And within this, I can say, this is a div. And then let's include a span tag within that. This is a span. And this is the div again. If I run this, it'll show almost as like one line because spans and divs function-wise are almost the same. See, this is a div, this is a span, this is the div again. You see no difference because the span, as long as it's on one line, is exactly a div. But let's reverse this. So if I have a span and within that I include a div, this is a div and this is a span. Let's see what happens when we run this. Notice that this is where the text was before. And we're waiting for it to run. Okay, if it never run, oh, okay, see, this is not, this is not what you define it as. A span is only going to stay on one line, but the div forced it onto two. Now, I don't actually know why this is because, well, actually I do. It's just note that, for example, in the replit environment, you're able to do this, but this is like a bad practice in general. In some environments, for example, VS Code, the compiler will tell you that this is wrong, that you can't have a new line. Divs automatically create a new line. So you can't have a new line within a span, which is supposed to be one line. So just know that some of these things will work in some environments. I haven't worked with Replit a lot, but this will work in some environments and not in some others. And because HTML on the web is supposed to be accessible by all sorts of devices and environments, it's best to actually avoid this sort of thing. And if you're programming, experimenting with an environment like Replit, it might be harder to tell. But just know that to understand what the attributes of a tag actually are, you have to actually be aware of what they're doing in addition to displaying the text. Okay. Now, I think that was enough of me talking. Let's, for the remainder of class, work through a Kahoot. So let me send you guys the pin. Have we all done a Kahoot? Does anyone want me to explain how to use it? Okay, so go to kahoot.it, and then the code is input this code into it. This is a just a simple Kahoot on some HTML tags, a little bit of CSS, and yeah, just a fun way to end the class and practice a little bit of what we've done. Yeah, thanks, Bowen. And we'll talk through the questions as we go through and ask questions if you guys want. Let me share my screen again. Okay. Great. We have 11 students today, so let's just wait a bit. But while we're here, this Kahoot is actually from W3 Schools. Joseph was actually the one who found it. But W3 Schools is a really good place to go when you're looking for a quick, concise answer to a lot of HTML tags, attributes, things like that. So actually, let me reshare my screen and I can show you guys the website just now. This is a really, really good resource. If I go to W3 Schools, go in here, it has tons of tutorials and you'll see HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, as well as a ton of other different languages. If you click here, it has so many things that you can browse by categories. So for example, if we're going to, okay, we were talking about lists just now. See, it'll show you the difference between an unordered list and ordered list. It'll tell you how to start the tags. It'll have examples, brief description of what they are, little variations as well. For example, we talked about unordered ordered lists, but there's also like the list element itself, a description lists, the term within the description list, etc. So yeah, definitely check out W3 Schools and explore on your own. This class definitely does not have enough time to properly teach you guys all of the tags that you will ever see. Okay. Four more students. Let me know in the chat if you guys need help actually getting into the Kahoot. We have 10 minutes of class left, so I don't know if other students are maybe AFK. Sometimes they are, but okay, we'll just give it one more minute. And okay, wait, actually, I think maybe students are able to join halfway through. So, okay, we'll just start now, I guess. Okay, so this doesn't have to do a lot with the content itself, just something to start off with, in case you guys remember. Nice. Close. Markup because we're marking things. Yeah. Can you read out the options because you have to switch screens? Um, do you mean like all four options or just like the result? Okay, sure, I can read out the options as well. Okay, next one. Okay, so the text between what and what describes an HTML document. The first choice is head. The second one is HTML. The blue one is HTML. The yellow one is P for paragraph. And the green one is doc type. Okay, close. Okay, so HTML is going to specify the actual code in there. And I see some of you guys chose doc type. That's an easy mistake to make. Doc type, I didn't touch on this, and that's my bad. But doc type is just telling the document that this is HTML in a way. So it's like the same function as an HTML, but more for the backend computing systems. The actual code, the actual HTML will always go between the HTML tags. The Kahoot isn't working. Okay, let's see. Could you maybe, Maxwell, just follow along on my screen, look at the results and just mentally choose one and we'll go through the explanations. Okay, great. So next one. Ooh, I don't know if we can finish in time actually, guys. It's 25 questions. The text between what and what provides information about the document. So there's the red one is head and head, the blue one is HTTP, the yellow one is HTML, and the green one is heading. Okay, the timer on this might be set a little bit quick, but it's okay. We can talk through this. So again, this is the head tag that I was talking about at the start. This contains the metadata. For example, like the title and some other things like UTF-8, what character sets they're using behind the computer, that programmers and the computer will use mostly. So just remember, information about the document, what you really need to know is going to be between the head. Next. Okay, the text between what and what provides a title for the document or web page. Red is H1, blue is HTML, yellow is title, and green is href, A standing for link. Okay, 7 answers. Is there a way to, let's see. Oh, close. Okay. Yeah, this is also another easy mistake to make. So the H1, it's a heading, so the biggest heading. But we're always going to have a title that's bigger than anything else. The H1 is just headings for sections within the document. Okay. The text between what and what shows or describes the main content of the page. Red is H1, blue is body, yellow is HTML, and green is P1/P2. Okay. Yep, great. Yeah, okay, so body, everything else is going to go into the body. Just to note, the green one could not have been true no matter what, because the closing tags, the content doesn't even match the first one. Okay. Nice, streak of 5. Okay. The text between what and what describes a heading. Red is head, blue is title, yellow is heading, and green is H1. Great. Oh, okay, I see. So this, I like this question actually. It actually caught me for a second as well. So yellow, the words heading actually aren't an HTML tag. Yeah, they're to trick you. Headings will always be H1, H2, H3. And then I also see someone put head. Remember, head is the metadata, like the head, the very top of the document. Okay, next question. The text between what and what describes a paragraph. Red is head, blue is HTML, yellow is href, and green is P. Okay, nice. Okay, href, remember, href is a link. So typically in the demonstration that I showed, it's actually tag A, and href is an attribute, something that describes that tag, that provides additional information for that tag. A paragraph, like a div or a span, is just a plain P. Okay, next one. Ooh, I see some competition. All right, HTML links or anchors are defined with the what tag. Red is A, blue is link, yellow is anchor, and green is href. Ooh, okay. See, this one, I also like this question. The link attribute is actually not a, it simply doesn't work. This is my bad. I know I mentioned at first that HTML tags are pretty intuitive to understand, but some of the basic ones, I don't know why the people who designed this language ever did this, but the basic ones are the ones that typically don't make much sense. It's plain A. And anchor, I see someone else also put anchor. Anchor is just a pure A. And that's just something to remember and Google experiment with. Yeah. Ooh, first and second place. Okay, the link's destination is specified in the what attribute. For example, in an A tag, what equals, and then in quotation marks, a link. So red is hreg, blue is href, yellow is src, and green is img, image. So again, red is href. Okay, everyone's answered. Nice. Okay, yeah, image is just a pure image. I know this might be a little confusing. I know we talked about the image having a source attribute, but that was kind of my bad on wording. But remember that any tag, a lot of tags can have attributes. Oh, you didn't come to class last time. After class, we can talk if you want, if you have questions. Also, your parents should have gotten an email with the class recording last time, not sent out by me or Joseph, but by the cloud classroom. And don't worry, class last time, we basically just talked about the relationship between HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Okay, so yeah, it's an href. Href reference. Okay, next. Right, HTML images are defined with the what tag? Red is image, blue is A, yellow is image typed out in words. Red is IMG, yellow is image typed out in words, and then green is SRC. Okay, yeah, image, just really quickly, the yellow one, that's just trick question. And then on the green one, SRC is an attribute. It's not a tag by itself. Okay, last question for today, guys. This will make it or break it. What is the purpose of indentation in HTML? Ooh, this will make you think, actually. This is good. Red says the indents are required by HTML's syntax. Blue says it tells the browser what operating system you're using. Yellow says HTML is white space dependent, which means that you need white space. And green says it makes the code more readable. Okay, I like this question. So first of all, red, no, actually, it's not required in HTML syntax at all. Remember, I could place as many new lines as I wanted, as many spaces. I could put tabs between text, and it would just ignore it. It has nothing to do with HTML interpreting it. HTML just reads the tags. And the blue answer, no. The browser and the operating system are not related throughout the HTML. That might be a tempting answer, but the indentation, as I mentioned before, is just ignored. And yes, it's for the programmers themselves. It's more readable, more organized, so that when other people, or even yourself later, go back to read this, it's just easier to see. Good, that was a good place to end. Okay. Well, that's it for class, everyone. If you have questions, concerns, feel free to stay a bit and ask either me or Joseph. Otherwise, see you guys on Friday or Saturday, depending where you are.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Bye.